Good afternoon and welcome to the pre-agenda interview for Wednesday, March 18th, 2026 for the Pittsburgh Water and the Pittsburgh Land Bank. Would the clerk please read the title of the bills?
Bill 135, Resolution appointing Lou Irwin as a member of the Board of Directors of Pittsburgh Water for a term to expire January 1, 2031. And Bill 151, Resolution appointing Jesse Ainsman as a member of the Board of Directors of the Pittsburgh Land Bank for a term to expire January 1, 2027, serving the remainder of the term for a seat previously held by Tamara Dudukovich.
And for the record, we are currently joined by Councilwoman Strasburger and Councilman Wilson. What we would like to do is turn it over to you to tell us who you are and tell us why you're wanting and willing to serve on this board. And then after you both go, we'll allow members to ask questions.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Lou Irwin, and thanks for the opportunity to come and meet with you today to talk about this important volunteer responsibility that the mayor asked me to take on. In terms of my background, there are a number of things I think are relevant to service on the Pittsburgh Water Board of Directors. I'll kind of start from the big and work it down to the small and make it quick. First off, by way of background, I am a retired Army two-star. The relevance of that is that in my latter responsibilities, I worked in the Pentagon and was involved in a lot of contract oversight, where awarding contracts, executing contracts, and I think importantly, understanding that government is all about having this much responsibility, but having this many resources, and bringing people together at the table with different interests, different equities, different authorities, different resources, and trying to hammer out solutions to public problems that are both effective, but also fair. Also, in my Army responsibilities, I happen to be a combat engineer. So what that means is I also had responsibility for overseeing, especially at senior level, overseeing large construction projects and managing, making sure that a bunch of moving parts are moving at the same time and in the same direction to get to the required outcomes. On the civilian side, and perhaps the reason I'm at this table today, I'm a professor of American government public policy at Duquesne University, where back in the day, our new mayor happened to be one of my students back in the 2000s. So anyway, as it happens, work a lot in the areas of public policy, and for the last, really since post-COVID years when I returned from the military, we've been focused on a lot of local issues, city issues, county issues, Pittsburgh public school issues, to include, I had Councilmember Strasburger had a chance to visit us in the classroom for a public policy seminar last spring, as did then Allegheny County Controller Corey O'Connor and now Chief of Staff Dan Gilman. So I have a real serious interest in these issues and have been studying a whole host of issues that are important to us in our city and our region for years now. In terms of some other connective tissue that connects me to these responsibilities, my wife and I live in Shenley Farm, so of course we are Pittsburgh Water customers. I'm also the chair, they call it the president, of our neighborhood association, the Shenley Farm Civic Association. And back in the day, this was about 20 years ago, and of course a much smaller scale than what we're talking about here in Pittsburgh. I also served on the Stormwater Management Committee in Peters Township for some years. And the relevance of that, not only just being in kind of the whole area of the provision and protection of the water supply, was looking at the increasing frequency of storms that we think of as 100-year storms, 50-year storms, 20-year storms, but also the intensity of those storms and what mitigation we should undertake in terms of water, the infrastructure, in order to deal with some of these emergent problems. So from all those perspectives, I think that I can add something to the board in terms of their deliberations and their activities. But mostly, I view this as an opportunity to serve the public, an opportunity to learn, and an opportunity to collaborate with the professional staff at the authority as well as my fellow board members if I am confirmed, and I look forward to that opportunity. Thank you.
Very much.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jesse Ainsman. I'm a commercial real estate broker at JLL. First and foremost, I want to thank you all for having me here today and considering me for this board position at the Pittsburgh Land Bank. First and foremost, I am fourth generation city of Pittsburgh. My family originally lived in the Hill District, then over to Stanton Heights, eventually over to Squirrel Hill, which is where I currently live today, and I'm raising my 2 children. I went to Taylor Alderdice High School and played City League sports my entire childhood. Traveling to these different neighborhoods while playing sports really made me appreciate at a pretty young age how unique and special this city really is. I'm proud to have remained in this city as an adult, and like I said, very proud to be raising my kids in the city of Pittsburgh. I've been a commercial real estate broker in our city for the past 12 years. Currently, I'm responsible for leasing office buildings in the city, such as Bakery Square in East Liberty, Mill 19 in Hazelwood Green, Tech Mill 41 in Lawrenceville, Fifth Avenue Place downtown, and several other urban and suburban properties. My professional career has been built on stabilizing and filling buildings for my clients, who are all primarily established developers. I work with local Pittsburgh developers as well as national and institutional developers. I see this opportunity to serve on this board as a way to help the neighborhoods in the city that are often overlooked by the type of folks that I work with on a day-to-day basis. As I mentioned, growing up and currently live in Squirrel Hill, I've seen the other neighborhoods that desperately need help. And if I can help through activating unproductive real property, I'll be honored to accept that challenge. I would also welcome the opportunity to be creative in generating recurring revenue streams for the land bank. Please don't ask me how I would do that today, because I don't know the answer to that question. But what I am looking forward to is the opportunity to work with City Council, the existing board members, see what tools are at our disposal, use those tools, and try to think outside the box and grow upon what we have available. I'm familiar with the rapidly developing neighborhoods like East Liberty and the Strip District. I know the local businesses, I understand the area as well, and I can identify appropriate uses for these undeveloped parcels. However, like I mentioned, I'm particularly interested in working with the neighborhoods that need our help the most. These underserved areas, in my opinion, need our support, and I feel very passionate about doing what I can with my skill set and with the power of the board. If appointed to the board, I'll utilize my skill set, my network of real estate professionals, as well as the City of Pittsburgh residents to fulfill the duties of the Land Bank Board. Thanks.
Very much. Let the record reflect, we've also been joined by Councilman Warwick, and we'll start with Councilman Strasburger.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you both for being here today. I appreciate your opening remarks, and I'll also start by saying that if I need to step out before, I do need to step out at just before 2:30, so if I leave before we finish, my apologies in advance. I guess I should refer to you as Dr. Irwin. I know you as Lou. You're a constituent. We've interacted a lot, and I think this is my first time seeing your CV. So it's incredibly impressive, and I'm glad that you have been appointed by the mayor to the Pittsburgh Water Board. As you know, I serve as vice chair, and I think that you bring a really interesting background to the role. I also appreciate that you have had some time to think about stormwater. It's a big focus, and I think it needs to be an increasing focus of the board and of the authority as a whole. I was interested in what you said about oversight. And oversight of, in the case of Pittsburgh Water, it's oversight of contractors and subcontractors and ensuring that the work that's happening on the ground truly reflects the principles and the mission of the entity that whose name is attached to it. If you could expound on that a little bit as to how you think that experience might apply to even recommendations, conversations within the board with the senior staff, et cetera, to help continue to do quality control operations, on the ground. I'd be really interested to hear some of your thoughts, initial thoughts.
So thank you for that question, and it is certainly an important one. I had the opportunity to watch the public meeting of Pittsburgh Water from February, and as part of as you no doubt remember, a number of the comments from the public had to do with with different contracted companies carrying out the work that Pittsburgh Water needed them to do, and some of the impacts that those contracts, the contractors were having on our neighbors' quality of life. This is a tough one. There's never an easy solution to these things, but certainly one of the things I was struck by is that I think for all the great work that Pittsburgh Water is doing, this is something that we should, as a board, take a look at, which is how do we make sure that in carrying out, you've got so many different projects going in so many different directions, many of them on a 5-year timeline, a 10-year timeline, connected to different sequenced projects. How can you still make sure that our neighbors know that they're being heard, and how can we oversee and execute those contracts in a way that we can minimize the adverse impacts while they're being done. I've been at this a long time, in a different setting, of course. It's one of those things where you're never going to please everyone, right? But again, in the early going, and I see evidence of tremendous work that this authority is doing, this is something I think should be an area of focus going forward.
Thank you. Thank you. And Mr. Ainsman, thank you for your willingness to serve. I don't have too many questions. I'll let the member of the land bank, my colleague who's a member of the land bank, ask some of the more nitty-gritty questions, but certainly having served on a task force with my colleague Councilman Wilson to identify alternative streams or growth potential for the land bank, I do care about that. I won't ask you about it today, where those sources are coming from, because I don't think we fully know either, but certainly agree that it's necessary. Glad that you're thinking about it. Glad that you're thinking of how to scale, which is what's necessary. And I guess the only thing I'll ask is what are you what aspect of serving on the land bank board are you kind of most interested in or most interested in learning about?
Sure. I think number one would be serving and helping the underserved communities. The areas that you go in, the neighborhoods that have vacant lot after vacant lot, dilapidated housing. If we can acquire and put together a contiguous block of parcels and not just market that to residents and residential developers, but commercial developers as well, and not in the private sector, I think that's what really I'm excited about for this opportunity, is to help those neighborhoods use my skill set to do that, and also, quite frankly, my network of developers to kind of expand the reach that we may have at this point.
Mm-hmm. And just a follow up, the land bank's mission has up until this point been to ensure that those parcels that are being turned over to or disposed of to the private market are done so with entities that will meet certain standards around affordability, around responsible growth and development. It's been an easier task. Admittedly, I think, I don't want to speak for my colleagues serving on the land bank, but probably an easier task to manage that with a lower volume of transfers each year. If we see what we want to see, which is major growth, it might be a little bit more difficult. Is that something that you're committed to continue that, the mission of the land bank being for a very particular kind of willing buyer to meet certain standards, or, like I said, around either a nonprofit kind of land trust or those who are committed to affordable growth, affordable development, those sort of standards. I don't have all of them at the ready, but.
Yeah, no, I think I can definitely add value in the developer vetting process. I've seen developers over the past 12 years in all shapes and sizes, I guess. And clearly some have intentions that they do want to improve the city and make it a better neighborhood, while obviously, generating income through their properties. So I think through the developer vetting process, but it doesn't end there, it's holding them accountable as well. So you see these developers, they say, yeah, we're going to build a beautiful park next to this. We're going to make this beautiful building. We have a local business who wants to do a 10-year lease in our building. Then they better do that. And I see the land bank board being kind of that authoritative figure to make sure they do. Yep.
I have no further questions. Thank you both for your willingness to serve on these authorities, boards. We couldn't do this work without residents throughout the city and their willingness to serve in this capacity. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Wilson.
Yes, thank you. And thank you both for your willingness to serve. I'll start with the Pittsburgh Water. I think that's the first time I got that correct recently with the name change.
Right.
I'm starting on a good note. So yeah, very impressed with your initial intro speech, and really just interested in your career in general. But I wanted to, since we're here for Pittsburgh Water, I want to make sure I focus on that. And to that effect, I think you mentioned, how does Pittsburgh Water, how does the public feel heard? Did you say that recently? Okay. So I thought that was a good comment, because I know I represent some residents that feel like, unfortunately, some residents look at Pittsburgh Water as like they have just a lot of complaints about certain things that happen. My take on it is it's great. Pittsburgh Water is great. They're here. They're trying to figure out this, like you kind of pointed out, this large problem, minimal resources, and they fit into that kind of government agency. And I think they're trying to accomplish so much, and it's typical construction work that they have to do to get to the finish point, to the finish line, in terms of whether it's a lead line, just getting that lead line fixed. But just like my office, I asked the same question, like, how can we make sure that the residents are feeling heard, or the customers, I guess, in this when we talk about Pittsburgh Water. So could you elaborate on that? Like, do you have any ideas? Do you see for yourself that Pittsburgh Water is doing something that doesn't make residents feel like, they're a good paying customer?
It's a great question. Now, again, keeping in mind that I'm brand new to this, right, and to the Pittsburgh Water, or PWSA as I knew it before. The first point I would make is I was made aware in talking to Will Pickering, the CEO, about some of the, let's call it the checkered history of that authority and the management of Pittsburgh Water. For the record, my wife and I moved into Shenley Farms about 3 years ago. We lived downtown for 2 years before that while we were looking for a home. So we weren't really connected to these issues at that point. But a couple of things. One, I would imagine, this being Pittsburgh, the city we love, that even if there are good things going on right now with Pittsburgh Water, and my initial sense is someone who has seen a lot of different agencies, departments, and offices of government, right? All of the indicators I've seen so far have been positive ones. In my interactions, looking at meetings, reading through the mission statement, the values, interacting with some of the staff, checking out a little bit of the public meetings, and that, of course, not privy to the executive sessions. But anyway, I would imagine the whole Veolia management issue from now, I guess, about 6, 7, 8 years ago. I would imagine that, especially for some of our residents who are of more limited means, maybe don't have the ability or to really kind of be heard when they're reaching out and there's something going wrong with their water service, and maybe they're the people that are easiest to ignore. I would imagine that there is a lot of residual, call it resentment, dissatisfaction, memory of how this water authority was not responsive, did not, and Will walk me through some of the dynamics of that, how the profit structure was set up for that management company and why it it incentivized poor service, right? Limited service. So I would imagine the first thing that's going on here, and again, I'm only saying this as an initial impression coming into this whole process and getting my arms around what's going on here. And again, I'm not judging what's going on now. All the indicators to me have been positive ones. But I would imagine there's still some memory of that and some lingering resentment or dissatisfaction, or maybe even, hey, you're going to have to show me that you can actually do better than what I remember you doing. So that's the first thing. There's probably some of that context out there across, especially, again, for the folks who've lived in their homes the longest, maybe limited means, maybe the increases in water bills. They saw their water bills go up. They did not see a corresponding increase in the quality of the service. Maybe even it went the other direction, right? And so that's probably out there. But when I talk about communications and listening, and again, my sense is there's a lot of really good people doing a lot of good work in this organization. And again, I'm talking about the professional staff, I'm talking about the board, I'm talking about the people who are out there, the operators actually making these things happen. There's a number of ways you can listen, right? I know that this authority or Pittsburgh Water did a recent survey, or maybe they do continual surveys where they're trying to get customers to tell them what the good and the bad is. That should be, and I'm sure it is, just haven't seen it, systematized and presented to the authorities or to the board, so that the board can make decisions about priorities and the weighting of resources that will connect to that. 311 calls. Just getting a sense from the mayor's office, what are those calls about connected to water or sewer or that. Response times in terms of, we had a really difficult winter this year. In fact, for some reason, it kept going yesterday. I don't know why. But anyway, I saw a number of water main breaks, and that, of course, shut down roads over in North Oakland where we live and going out towards the East End. So again, being able to respond to those kinds of emergent requirements quickly and effectively, that is a measure of listening to the community. And then, of course, for people who really have some level of frustration or don't feel that they're being heard, how do we respond to them when they when they carve out time in their day, which is in the work week, to come out and come to a public meeting of the authority? How do we take in their feedback? Well, what's the mechanism for us to respond to that feedback? Do we, and again, I'm assuming we do these things, but that's a really important thing, is to not just kind of nod and we've got it, but do you have a mechanism and a system in place to respond to people and to follow up to let them know that you've been heard? And again, last point on this, again, I go back, we've all done this quite a while. Your requirements are this big, your resources are this big. So if you're going to decide that you're going to put a priority over here, that takes a priority away from something else. And again, I'm not on the board. I'm not prejudging any decisions. Again, my impression has been a very positive one with the leadership there. But that'll be something that I'll be looking at and certainly to respond to your question.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think it's a real what do you call it, like real undertaking for the homeowner to understand what they're about to go through if they're going to get a main line and then all the lead lines replaced on their street. And from my experience, working with the public that, who's living through that, I lived through it on my street a couple years ago. And, I'm kind of, I'm not going to complain. I'm the government official. Like, I'm supposed to be responsible for you know,
You're gonna receive
we're
complaints,
accountable.
right?
We're going to receive the complaints, right? But I just think it is interesting. I mean, it's surely needed, obviously, like you mentioned, Viola, and then the the whole lead line, the lead issue, focused on changing the lead lines. There's a mainline program. So when those two really overlap, that seems where there's just a real disconnect with the public, because I just think they're not used to going through something like this. When's the last major infrastructure thing that happened? I mean, we're going to have the bridge after the tunnel. That's going to be a huge major disruption. I can't remember what the bridge's name is, but after the Squirrel Hole tunnels, that bridge is that's a huge. Was that Commercial Street Bridge? It's going to be a huge undertaking. But right in front of their home, something like that probably hasn't happened in 70, 100 years. Some major construction like that. We can pave in a day and be out, but something like that where you have to come back multiple times. So I think it's surely needed. I think it's a great job that that Pittsburgh Water's doing. I almost said it, but I always just wonder if there's something else that could happen prior to that. Like, there's definitely some brainstorming that could probably happen, but because there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. Good work. And the only other thing I'll say that I'll coordinate with the council person here that's on the board. But and I think I've relayed some of this already, but I guess I just wish that there was more of a agreement between PWSA Engineering or Pittsburgh Water Engineering and our street supervisors and our right-of-way people that basically are paving, everyone who's involved with paving at the city. Because I've had some streets that were done, some sections of streets that were done by the contractor that was hired from Pittsburgh Water that aren't, basically Pittsburgh Water doesn't agree with how our paving people at the city would have done it. So I don't know. There's a big disconnect there that I'm seeing recently. And
you mean
I'll
had
connect.
responsibility for that?
Well, it's a street that's repaved through Pittsburgh Water, and then when there's like some pooling of water that didn't used to be there before, let's say for example, there's PWSA has an understanding, Pittsburgh Water has an understanding that they're not responsible to improve the street. So at the city, we improve the street. If we see that there is this puddling happening, we take action to improve the street. So I think, we only got that one shot at paving every so many years. So I think that's, I'm not sure that that's really down at the board level, but I think that also speaks to the relationship between the customer and Pittsburgh Water. So I'm currently working through some of those issues. We've been working through it for really maybe the past 10 months, and I think it's rising to a point where I'm gonna, put together some higher level meetings to try and figure out what's really going on, because it's not happening in just one instance. Now it's like there's another instance, and I think all the paving that Pittsburgh Water's doing, I'm sure there might be more. I don't represent everywhere in the city. So I am interested in that because, we have a certain contractor of paving here at the city, and I know there's more than one contractor that's a contractor for paving for Pittsburgh Water. So, that I don't really need to comment on that. I'm just saying that's something I'm currently working through, and I think it speaks to, because those residents are wondering, like, well, if the city would have done this, the city's telling them, like, we would have done a better job.
I will give you a quick one. So I've made a note of that to carry it back should I be confirmed. But I think that kind of connects to the contract, the provisions of the contracts, right? So it's something you can ask about. What's the standard for the remediation, the pavement remediation after the work is done? Is it just a patch standard, or is it back to, the standard that, I think it's DOMI, right? Would they bring it to that standard? So I think that's a contract provision. Now, the additional provisions, as you know, might cost additional money. But the other piece is also connected to my original comment about the conduct of the sites and minimizing the mess, minimizing the disruption where you can. There's some, as you know, better than I do, there's sometimes you just can't get around that, right? In fact, it took me 20 minutes to get here by bus from Oakland. But your point's taken.
Yeah. Yeah, and the only thing that I heard that feels like it would solve a lot of it, because I have had a great paving experience from city employees and the contractors that we hire. They've been able to fix so many flooding issues, so many on-street water issues to keep water on the street and into the catch basin. I've had my residents have had a phenomenal experience whenever that's done by the city. And the only solution I could think of is that the city of Pittsburgh takes on the repaving, after Pittsburgh Water has come through.
I would defer to the council on
So
that.
I don't know what it would take to do that, but I'm interested in those conversations. So I know we're getting into the weeds on something new. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, we will obviously follow up on that then. If more than one of us arrive at that question. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your willingness to serve. And Jesse, nice to meet you.
Thank you.
And thanks for your willingness to serve. I want to go back to some of the things that you were first mentioning in terms of, combining, parcels for like commercial developers. That's possibly something we could get to at the land bank. I know right now, and I want to get your take on this. Right now, we're really working through how to get properties sold to, individuals, entities that aren't just like neighborhood organizations that have a CDC. So we have a for sale program, and to find the perfect, I don't know, I'm just gonna pick up some example like a newlyweds that wants to fix up a house. Are they fully aware how to get a construction loan, or they already have money to do that, and are we able to? So I think our next step, I think that's really hard to find, and I was wondering your take on this, but I was just curious on just in general, like even if we move past that, we sell to a reliable contractor that's going to fix it up, and then sell to, because we have a deed restriction on these that it would have to be owner occupied for 5 years. That's currently the model we're working with. What do you think the interest is of people, anyone, looking to invest, whether they're relocating from somewhere else or just someone that lives in the city and they see that house down the street and they want to fix it up? Like, what do you think the interest is of just in general of the public? Because since you work for JLL, you're obviously aware of the interest of office space. So I just didn't know if you had a take on what the interest of just even what we're even trying to do here.
Sure.
Which is the major one is to stabilize the house, if we have to at all, and then sell it. We have a good tool. We have a good tool to clean the title fast and move the property as fast as we can, faster than it would be at the city or at the URA. So we have this great tool, but our outlying issue, usually is how much interest do we have in this whether it's one house or multiple houses to fix up and then get them back on the tax rolls.
Sure. So I think the end user you're referring to right now gets on their phone, they go to Zillow. They may not even know the land bank exists, know that these resources are available to City of Pittsburgh residents. And I think it's really a marketing thing that the land bank should strengthen as far as making the general public, younger married folks, multifamily developers, smaller, who are developing maybe 2 or 3 houses at one time. They need to be aware of these services. They need to be aware of the tools that we have and that how they don't have to go through a typical sales process that they may be used to. And it could be easier. As long as it's the right developer, the right user, I think it really comes down to marketing. Because these users you speak of, like I said, like they're on Zillow, they're on LoopNet, whatever public site that they get through Google to search.
Yeah, so I believe we're on Zillow now. I'm not
Okay.
saying we're, fully up and running with every single property on there, but I believe, like the one on Antrim, I think we had it on Zillow. I can't remember where that property is, but that is definitely, the mindset of our executive director, acting executive director right now, Sally Stadelman, in terms of trying to sell, a property in a more popular way. Is that how
Sure.
you'd say it?
And I think residential agents should be aware of these properties too. Residential agents typically work in the neighborhoods. They have their specialties. There's, the East End broker, the South Hills broker. Those are the folks that we should make aware of what is in the bank right now, what opportunities we do have. Not everyone's coming to them and saying, hey, we want a house that's ready to go, beautiful, backyard, swimming pool. A lot of folks want to fix up a house. They want to eventually flip it. They want to develop it. They want to build it. And I think, not to keep repeating myself, but it comes down to marketing and making them aware. And there's a lot of different ways the board could go about that.
Okay. Yeah. So we're definitely on Zillow and maybe some other, websites as well. But do you think that, and we're not going to figure this out here, but I'm just, curious, like, do you think that we have an issue with individuals that are interested in actually rehabbing the house and living in it? Like, do we have like enough pool of individuals that are interested in that? Or do you think that we have an issue with the bank? Like, do you think that the bank isn't really favoring individuals that are interested in doing, that type of construction?
Sure. I can't really speak to the demand of the individuals that would be looking to do that type of work instead of just buying a house. But I do think that they do exist. They are in the city, and those people need to be made aware of the land bank. Because obviously I didn't go on Zillow and didn't see the listings on Zillow, but does it make it clear that these are parcels and properties that are part of the land bank? And if so, what does that even mean? And how could this process be different than what they expect this process to be? And I think that's where the advantage could be.
Okay. Now you have a quite extensive experience with working with developers. So, how do you see yourself utilizing that experience with us? Because we do have, a process that we are vetting different buyers. And so regardless of whether it's a developer or a CDC, a nonprofit, like, do you think that there's room, for improvement, and how do you see that?
I think it really comes down to what the plans are for these people, right? Whether it's a developer, whether it's, whoever that may be, the use and what they're going to do with that land is important. And quite frankly, I'm a bit excited for the opportunity not to represent the developers and represent the city of Pittsburgh on that, to really put in these communities what needs to happen and the type of uses that would improve, everybody in the neighborhood.
All right, my last question. I'm gonna give you more questions because
I'm ready.
I've been on the board for the past few years, and I'm deeply invested in it. So the other one was just, I wanted to ask you, how do you feel about being on a board that, we don't have to sell to the highest bidder. So at the city, we have to sell to the highest bidder. So on the land bank, like I said, it's a good tool, is that we do have, the ability to not sell to, speculators from out of town. We have a very, a family style feel to, trying to, get property from the land bank. Like, we want to know that you're invested in the neighborhood, the community, and maybe I should say we have a community driven, not family style. We have a community driven like process. So, you know, I think that's important for me because I know a lot of the issues that we see in like as a representative when I see in the neighborhood, especially like, you know, Airbnbs that are having unruly parties. Like I think that's the land bank's a really important tool with making sure that properties get into the right hands. And so how do you feel about, you know, being on a board that is going to take a lot of different factors into consideration to sell a property to an individual or, you know, an entity?
Refreshed, I think, is the word. I think it'd be very refreshing to be able to think not like a developer looking to maximize profit, however, which way that would be, but instead of just looking out for the community at large. So not just in my job, obviously, the highest bidder for a deal gets the deal. And sometimes that's not right. So with this opportunity to be on the board, quite frankly, doing the right thing would feel pretty good.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Thank you for your comments.
Yep.
Thank you, Councilman Warwick.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both for being here, for your willingness to be on these boards or authority. So I'll start with Pittsburgh Water. I represent and I live in actually 4 Mile Run. I don't know if you're familiar. So I guess I would just ask you if you're familiar with the flooding issues in that area and kind of the history of it, and if you have any thoughts about that area.
So I will say I am within the last 2 weeks, right? So I've learned about this. And both the CEO of Pittsburgh Water, Will Pickering, and Matt Singer, who's sitting back here from the mayor's or the chief of staff's office, both brought that to my attention and said this was an issue that is unresolved and that there are quite a few folks who are frustrated by this. And when Will walked me through this, I understood exactly why, right? You know, there's an old saying among engineers that we underpromise, we aspire to underpromise and overdeliver, right? In this case, I think with good intentions, people may have overpromised and then not been able to deliver. And so, as I understand it, and you understand it far better than I do, there were a couple of different initiatives to resolve this, but they ran into a couple of walls. One was a design wall where the design was not adequate. Another one was a resource wall, and then another one, which is a pretty common one, is superimposing an intended design over top of an unknown subgrade and other, let's call it other requirements, flooding, that you really have, it just made it too hard to be able to deconflict the design as they had pulled it together. So I wouldn't pretend to have a solution to this as we sit here. I would just reassure you that, again, Mayor's office and Pittsburgh Water both brought this to my attention, and as we were talking about preparing for this potential board service, and it's definitely something that's on the radar and something, talking to Will, I don't know that there are any near-term quick fixes for this, but it's certainly something that has to be resolved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, currently the status is that Pittsburgh Water has put in monitoring systems to see if prior work has, how much prior work has alleviated the problem to date. I would say, just as a new board member, I would encourage just generally reaching out to some of the, and not just for this area of the city, but throughout the city with our sort of water advocates, right? I mean, in addition to sitting down with council members, right? But, you know, there's a, whether they're working on our watersheds, whether they're working in our parks, whether they're working with users, right, to really sit down with those folks who are advocating on the various aspects, who are often the ones lobbying Pittsburgh Water to do this or do that. I think that would be an eye-opening experience, right, to just hear about Pittsburgh Water from their perspective, right, as sort of water advocates and whatnot. And I think that Pittsburgh Water is doing a better job in recent years of engaging with those groups, right? But it's worthwhile, I think, as a new board member to connect with them as well. I'm glad Councilman Wilson mentioned utility coordination, and sort of the idea basically of I like the idea too of our utilities just kind of paying us basically to do the work, and then we manage the work, because the utility coordination is not great. And that's not just Pittsburgh Water, but it's the other utilities as well. At some point, I think we're going to have a post agenda about that to kind of talk about the issue overall. So thanks for bringing that one up. Another question I have is around budget transparency. So there was an article recently in, I think, Public Source that talking about the Pittsburgh Water Board and specifically kind of passing budgets without much discussion. So the board meetings are public, right? But then passing budgets without much discussion at that meeting, and it sort of being or seemed to be that the discussions had happened prior to the board meeting, right? Like sort of, I can't remember exactly, but comments like, well, we've all talked about this with y'all, and you know what I mean? And so that issue of transparency. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, or
That's the first I've heard of that article. I'll check out the article. You said Public Source?
I think so. I'm pretty sure.
I don't have anything at this point.
Yeah, I mean, just with utility bills being so high, and requests to the PUC to increase rates even more, right? The public has, in the same way, I mean, our budget process at council is incredibly public, right? Like we have to, we have public hearings and whatnot. But I think with an authority as large as PWSA, it's important to have that too. With regard to that, I don't know if something that sort of, and maybe this is related to my experience in the 4 Mile Run, but my understanding is that the stormwater fee that we all pay does not necessarily go to stormwater management. I don't know. That's something that sort of sticks in my side a little bit. I'm not sure the finances around that and why, you know what I mean, why that is. I'm sure there's some reasoning, but it is frustrating that there is this fee that we're paying that I think is just kind of going into the overall budget. But it'd be interesting to understand that a little better. I wanted to ask too if you had any thoughts around this kind of issue of private sewer lines. I don't know if you have that in Shenley. So it's something you see it a lot in the East End and Regent Square and kind of the older, you have those brick streets where it's like the sewer line. So there's a homeowner and they have a sewer line, but it's a private line. PWSA says that it's a private line.
You mean the main
right.
line out there?
Like it was built back, 100 years ago, like not in, maybe the city didn't build it, but some, and so what happens periodically is something happens to the line because PWSA doesn't accept ownership of the line is not being checked, I don't think. So there's not warning around. So all of a sudden a homeowner, or even worse, a whole street, and so now it's like multiple homeowners have, tens of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in repairs on a sewer line that they didn't even know they were responsible for.
Do you know of any places that?
I mean, I know
mean,
it was
do you know
the
any-
East End Avenue might have been one in Regent Square. That was a one from a while back. I don't know.
I can
It's-
ask the question.
Yeah, it's something to look at as a new board member, you know, because there is sort of this idea of like, well, why doesn't a PWSA own those lines? You know, why aren't they responsible for why? Just because they were built 100 years ago? I mean, that seems, you know, or if not that, like, is there? I know that there's a new insurance offering. I don't know if it's from Pittsburgh Water, but it's somehow through Pittsburgh Water. But even that is not really enough. It might be like $15,000 or $20,000.
So that's an insurance offering for that
Like if you-
common line, not just for
Right.
the one from the house.
I believe so, but at any rate, it's something. It's you know, it's a tricky situation for a homeowner to be in, right? To like
Absolutely.
all of a sudden you know, or their neighbors, or their, you know, there's a whole that's not even in front of theirs. It's their neighbor, and how do they fix it? And it would be nice if PWSA. Well, I would love to see PWSA just take ownership. Just be like, look, we're the sewer, we're the water, we're the sewer, and we'll take ownership of all these lines. Regardless of, you know, whether some developer built a wonky line 100 years ago, you know. And then the last, and I bring this up a lot around, so PWSA is, or sorry, Pittsburgh Water is unique in its billing, in the way that it does its billing, in that the customer, the bill does not go, if you are a renter, right, that the bill is tied to the property. And that is so that I assume unpaid bills can be sort of turn into liens on the property. But what that results in oftentimes is renters who, so renters getting evicted because they're not paying their water bill, right? So with other utilities, it's like the bill goes with you. You know what I mean? Like if I don't pay my, okay, so if I don't pay my Duquesne light bill, maybe they turn off my service, and then I leave and I go to a new apartment and they won't turn back on my, I mean, whatever that, but it's the renter's bill.
Oh, and right.
But with PWSA, it's the property owner's bill, right? And so what happens is that people are getting, even if they're paying their rent, they're getting evicted over their water bill, right? And, you know, we're putting so much money into affordable housing and eviction prevention and all of this work that to have people getting evicted over their water bill is difficult. And the other issue is that for renters, PWSA, Pittsburgh Water, has some really good programs for low-income customers, right? Where if you qualify, you get a significantly reduced bill, but those customers aren't able to take advantage of those bills because the landlords don't want the water bill in the tenant's name, because they don't want to deal with this, and I'm not paying, you know, the bill hasn't gotten paid, and you know what I mean? So they want to be, so what they're doing is the landlord is, the bill's in the landlord's name, and then they're just adding it to the rent, but they're not making that connection between, right? So that you're losing the benefit for the low-income customer. So I always just bring that up as something I would love for the board to dig into that a little bit and to understand, you know, why Pittsburgh Water structures the billing that way, and how much revenue is there actually from these property, right? I mean, that's the reason, right? Is that you have a lien on the property, right? So there's like, you can always get your money in theory, right?
And how common is it actually?
Yeah, but how much money, how much revenue does that actually generate, and is it worth? And then also just to understand how many folks are getting evicted over the water bill. That would be a conversation, of course, with like our, you know, housing advocates and, you know, neighborhood legal services and folks who do that work. I know, none of that was really questions, I know, but it was more
But
just,
it's very helpful, though.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Okay, well, and so then turning to the land bank, a kind of similar questions that we've already had, but like, you know, in terms of like this concept of sort of community ownership, and I hear what you're saying about because the money for the nonprofits feels like it's running out a little bit, right? Not all of them, but there's certainly like it's not quite as, it's harder and harder for you know, whether it's CDCs or other organizations that are just to pull together the financing to, you know, renovate these homes. And so the concern is that work slows down, and of course the private sector could step in and do it. Do you think there is a willingness there to take that on, even if there's affordability requirements? Because our experience, or it feels like the experience with the private sector is that they're not really interested in affordability requirements.
Sure, I guess it depends which players in the private sector you're talking to.
Yeah.
'Cause there's some that absolutely up front will say, yeah, I have no interest in doing a project like that. Then there's other developers who do projects like that across the whole country, and that's their deal. And that's what they do. I think identifying those developers, I do have a couple in mind right now, would be key. But yeah, it's really just about finding that right developer. That's what they do.
Okay. I mean, you know, I'm interested in anything that helps with vacant and abandoned properties, but that would be interesting to see if there are indeed, you know, sort of private developers that are open to, and of course, you know, working with our housing authority, I think that is for various reasons, and you know, and if that is an underutilized resource, right? The voucher program.
Sure.
Because you can get your rent, you can get your market rate rent, or at least very close to it, if you're accepting those vouchers and working with the housing authority.
And quite frankly, a safe investment for investors. and
Absolutely,
developers.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, all the landlords that didn't get paid over the pandemic, if you were taking vouchers, you were getting paid.
That's right.
So, well, good. I'm glad that you recognize that. So I have heard, so with the land bank, there's sometimes this, and always with CDCs and whatnot, this sort of tension in communities of like small folks who maybe want to do something small with one small piece of land versus like the CDC that has a bigger project in mind, and who, you know, who gets priority at the land bank, right? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think without conflict and controversy, it probably wouldn't be a board. That's what it comes with.
Yeah.
And with a group like the Pittsburgh Land Bank. But I guess just my question to your question is like, who would have final say in that conversation,
Yeah.
right? In a neighborhood, somebody wants someone who lives down the block to buy this piece to build a house for their granddaughter or something, or somebody wants to come in and put a Wingstop. You know, who makes that final decision? Clearly, one of them will help the community. Maybe the other will help the community in a different way. But I think analyzing the full deals and everything about those deals and those options, and I assume that's something the land bank does, would be a critical part of this process.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is just something to know that it you know, it does come up, this sort of, you know, the community. And I like the idea of people coming in and sort of living in the house and fixing it up at the same time. But that does take a lot of support, and also housing co-ops and all of these things. And the land bank is certainly in a position to help support those types of endeavors. But especially like if it's like, you know, like the small farmer who, you know, wants this piece of land for, you know, versus a larger development that could arguably, you know, benefit the community, and how does that, who gets priority? So it's good that you're thinking about that. And then I think the last question is, I mean, if you have any idea, so, and I may be wrong about this, but my understanding is that in some other cities that the land banks do actually sustain themselves, like they fix up the property. Is that, no? Well, I just
I'll defer to you
sort
on
of
that
like
one.
how could the land bank sort of become, get to a point where it could conceivably sustain itself. Like it, you know what I mean? Like maybe even it's the one fixing up the properties and selling like it's the flipper, so to speak.
Sure. Yeah, I really don't know the answer to that. I imagine it would involve a good deal of fundraising from a certain perspective. But if folks are giving money to people to develop real estate, they expect to have some sort of equity in that real estate. So yeah, not really sure what the answer to that one is yet.
Okay. Anyway, just I don't think I have anything else. I appreciate, you know, both of you being here and thoughtful answers, and, you know, look forward to working with you more.
Thank you.
Thank you. You all pretty much covered what I was going to put on the table, but I'll simply reiterate. When Scott Kunka was here for his interview for the Pittsburgh Water Board, I also brought up the concern with not just Pittsburgh Water, but all the utilities and the lack of coordination between tearing up, repaving streets, and or the lack of standard for which the utilities repave streets, because all over the city you can drive and there'll be places where you're driving and your car's a little tilted because the paving has sunk, and that's almost always utility work that was done, because they either pave a portion of the street and it sinks, they don't pave the entirety of the street. And so I mentioned to Scott at that time that I had begun conversations about give us the resources, because one, I think you're actually paying higher prices to pave than the city does. So if you were to give us a portion of your paving budget, we could then actually coordinate it. You're good at going in the ground, you're not good at sealing it back up. So that is a conversation that I think there's a good majority of us that would like to continue. So that's more of a FYI for you. And then for the land bank, Mr. Eisman, you had mentioned recurring revenue. Councilman Wilson led a task force looking at ways to have additional revenue. What I've seen from sustainable land banks across the country is the majority of them have some sort of dedicated funding source that normally comes from the state, as well as some of them have a dedicated tax, not recruitment, recipient, whereby if we take a derelict property, get it back onto the tax rolls, then part of the agreement with the city is, since we're adding revenue, we still get a portion of it. And that gets negotiated out, and maybe we get a portion of it for the next 3 years, and that becomes an ongoing revenue stream. So those are certainly conversations that we look forward, I think I also serve on the Land Bank Board with my colleague, that we look forward to having with you. Certainly welcome your input from the private side. And so look forward to working with you. And I thank you both for your willingness to serve. And with that, I believe we've exhausted the agenda, and so we are adjourned.